In a few minutes, so we may have a little interruption coming up, but we'll get going and tackle that as we get there. Before we get started, who in this room is thinking about running for office one day? All right, I see a couple hands out there. Hopefully we'll be able to talk a few more of you into it as this day goes on. So my name is Fritz Brogan. It's an honor to be here at CPAC speaking with you. I want to tell you a little bit about myself so you kind of understand my journey and where I came from. I grew up in the great state of Florida. Do we have any fellow Floridians here today? All right, one, we'll take it. So I grew up in Florida. I'm sure like many of you, I was a political nerd. I did whatever I could to learn about politics. I went door to door for campaigns, phone banked, and I had a unique opportunity to intern for Governor Jeb Bush in Florida when I was a little kid. So I got to travel across the country with him, campaigning for his brother in 2000. So it was a pretty cool experience. I came up here for college, went to Georgetown, worked in the White House's internship, worked in the Bush-Cheney re-election campaign, and decided to go to law school at Georgetown as well. So after law school, I was trying to figure out, like most law students, what to do next. I heard about this guy that was running for governor in my home state of Florida. Bit of a renegade, successful CEO, was thinking about taking on the establishment. So his name was Rick Scott. You may recognize his name. He was an incredible governor for 8 years. Just went on to be elected to the U.S. Senate. But I had the honor of working on his campaign and then becoming his deputy chief of staff for a year or two, and it was an incredible experience. But after that, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to get out of politics and get into business. So I moved back here to D.C. And started a company. When I was in college and law school, I always worked as a bartender. It was a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. Made some money, met a lot of cool people. But I realized a lot of the restaurants that I worked for were very successful, but they weren't necessarily run that well. So I had this idea of taking the campaign management mindset, the legal mindset, and applying it towards business. So we started small with a neighborhood pub. Now, 6 years later, we're one of the largest restaurant groups in D.C. We have 3 very large restaurants. Mission, which is across from Nationals Ballpark. Hawthorne on U Street, which is a popular hangout for young staffers, so hopefully you guys have been there. And then Mission at DuPont Circle, which has the best tacos and margaritas in town. So one of the important lessons I want to tell you today is don't just work in politics. It's great to be a staffer. It's great to work in different political organizations, but get out there in the world, start a business, run someone else's business, because you'll learn a lot of great life experiences. So because I run my own business, it allows me to also support political causes that I would like to choose and work for. So one of them is Maverick Pac. I serve as our national co-chair of Maverick Pac. We'll talk about Maverick Pac in a little bit, but our goal is to help elect young conservatives. There are a lot of other great organizations that are here this week that do similar things. What's unique about Maverick Pac is we focus on money. Like it or not, money is a very important part of politics. Maverick Pac is the only group that helps young candidates fundraise, bundle, and introduce them to a national fundraising network. I also work for my friend George P. Bush, who's the Texas Land Commissioner. I grew up with him in Florida. He's a great guy. He's in a statewide office in Texas, so I do a lot of work with him. And I serve as finance chairman to Francis Rooney. He was a very interesting member of Congress from Florida. He was a CEO. He serves as an ambassador to the Vatican. And he's sort of been a mentor of mine. So I think that it is possible in life to have a successful business career and work in politics. That's something I always tell people, that you can still do political stuff, but don't forget about business. So one of the questions I get often is, is the Republican Party dying out? Are there no more young conservatives running for office? And if you only read the Washington Post, if you only read CNN, only watch CNN, you might get that impression. They love to talk about Beto O'Rourke. They love to talk about AOC. But you don't really hear about the conservative rock stars that are in Congress. And trust me, they exist. The difference is they're not looking to get on the cover of Vogue. They're out there trying to actually pass legislation and do what they were elected to do. So I want to talk about 4 of my favorite conservative rock stars in Congress and how they got there and how their journey can apply to you. So the first is Dan Crenshaw. Did any of you guys go to his speech last night? Yeah, it was an awesome crowd there. Dan's an incredible guy. He was a Navy SEAL. He ran for office in Texas. I met with him when he was thinking about running. No one in the Texas Party establishment thought he could win. But just like his military background, he was a renegade. He ran kind of an unusual but great campaign, and he won. And now he's doing big things and is a great voice for our party. The second is also a veteran, Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin. He's a young Marine guy. Mike is one of the most policy-focused congressmen I've ever met. He wants to talk policy all the time. One of his biggest initiatives is term limits. Is anyone here in support of term limits? Yeah. So it's interesting. It's one of the few issues that most Americans agree on, term limits, until you get to Congress and every member of Congress finds a reason why they don't want to pass this bill, because they all want to stay in Congress. So Mike and a handful of other conservatives are trying to introduce term limits into Congress because it's great to get some fresh blood and some new ideas into Congress. Another great young congressional rock star is Elise Stefanik. I worked with Elise in the Bush administration. She's an incredible young woman. She was the youngest female ever elected to Congress until this cycle, when a certain congresswoman from New York became the youngest, but Elise is still the youngest Republican member of Congress. She also started this great organization called CPAC, which she started last month. And her goal is to help young Republican women win primaries. It's very difficult to win a primary when you're any age. It's especially difficult when you're young, and it's even harder when you're a young female. So Elise is running a great program to help elect young females to office. Lastly, do we have any Texans in this room? We have another great member of Congress from Texas, Will Hurd. Will works as a CIA officer overseas, did some incredible things, and he's running one of the hardest congressional districts in the country. It's basically a Democratic district, but he keeps winning because his constituents know that he's a great congressman and he's really getting stuff done in Congress. So what do all 4 of these great members of Congress have in common? They're all members of Maverick Pac before they were elected. So Maverick Pac was honored to help them get there, and I want to tell you a little about our message. So we were launched 15 years ago as part of the Bush campaign's re-election program. Before that, presidential campaigns had only raised money from older folks, typical CEOs, those kinds. But President Bush and his team had a different message. They wanted to go after young business leaders and young entrepreneurs and try to raise money from them. So they started a program called the Mavericks program. Nothing to do with John McCain, but it came from the Bush campaign. So there is some confusion on that, but it came from the Bush campaign. They started this program to help recruit young donors. One of the people that worked on it was a young lawyer named Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz is one of the founders of Maverick Pac. He's been a great friend of the organization over the years. So the organization started in Texas, just helping Texas candidates, then it decided to go nationwide. So in the last couple years, the last 3 cycles, we've had 7 members of Maverick Pac elected to Congress and the Senate, all of them under the age of 40, which is incredible. One of the things that makes us unique is we are a people PAC. We are not a policy PAC. We have members of the Republican Party from all ends of the spectrum with all different views. All we ask when you join organizations, you're a conservative and you want to help other conservatives, there's no litmus test to join our organization. We have members from across the country in different fields. They're in business, they're in law, they're doctors, they run companies, whatever it is, but we all unite together. And things are going very well at Maverick Pac. The last cycle, we gave out $200,000 in hard money to campaigns. $200,000 by DC PAC standards is actually pretty good. But it's even more impressive when you consider that it all came from people in their 20s and 30s giving us money. We have no fat cat donors. It all comes from people giving $100, a couple $100 at a time. We bundle that money and give it directly to federal candidates like Will Hurd, like Elise, like Dan Crenshaw, to help their voice get out there and their voice get heard. So when people come to me and say, hey, I want to run for office, or a friend of a friend comes to me and says, I want to run for office, I tell them it's very important to have 3 things. One, you have to have the right timing. One, you have to have the right message. And lastly, which we've talked about before, you have to have the right money. So timing in politics is very important. I've worked on some great campaigns that have lost. I've worked on some not so great campaigns that have won. So timing is something you can't control. One of the most important things you can do to put yourself in the best position is to network. You guys are already taking the first step. You're here at CPAC. So meet conservatives from across the country, meet different people, meet people from other fields, and talk to them, because you never know where in life how they might be able to help you when you decide to run for office. The other is be ready. There's so many examples in politics where you think that congressional seat's going to be held by some guy for 10 years, so I'm never going to run for it, and that person resigns or gets appointed to something else. So always be ready. And be prepared to run for a seat that you've never thought of. You never know when someone may approach you. A lot of what I'm talking about is for federal office, but it's also important to run for city council, for the state legislature, whatever it may be. Make sure you network and make sure you have your timing right. The other important thing is messaging. If you don't have a narrative about yourself when you run, someone else will create a narrative about you. It's probably not going to be one that you'd like. So messaging is very important. And when you run, yes, the national party, the state party, the local party, they will all help you. But you have to have your own voice. You all live in an area somewhere, and there are certain issues that affect that district or that area, and they're different from the national issues. So the best members of Congress in either party understand their local area. They understand what their citizens want, what they're afraid of, what they need. So you have to understand the right messaging and not just follow the platform of national politics. It's also really important to understand your values and defend them. So I'm a pretty conservative guy. When I went to Georgetown, every student at Georgetown has to take a class called Problem of God, where they talk about theology. So I happened to get put into the Problem of God class, the most liberal feminist theology professor Georgetown has. I almost thought about leaving the first day, but I stayed for whatever reason. It was an incredible experience for me because every day she forced me to explain why I was pro-life, why I was conservative, why I was Republican. So don't be afraid to defend your values. If you want to run for office, be prepared to fight. That kind of leads to my next point, which is the negativity of messaging. Unfortunately, politics is a contact sport. Regardless of what position you run for, it's probably going to be difficult, so you should prepare yourself. We all things out there that we're embarrassed about, something stupid you did in college, whatever it might be prepared to have that come out. Be prepared for people to lie about things and have your social media examined. We sort of live in a different era now where everything's on social media. I'm sure everyone in this room, if you look back 5 years ago on Facebook, there's probably something on there you'd regret. So get ready for all that to come out when you run for office. So be prepared with messaging if you want to run. Lastly, and the most important thing, is you have to fundraise when you run. So my friend Will Hurd that we talked about from Texas, he told a story of when he first ran for Congress. He made a list of 100 people. He said, when I run, I'm going to call these 100 people, and I'm confident these 100 people will give me some amount of money. So if you're ready to run for office, have that list of people, whether it's 50, whether it's 100, your friends, your family, your coworkers, your bosses, whoever they may be. Because you have to sell your story to others. It can be the perfect time for your campaign, and you can have a perfect message. But if you don't have the money to hire staff, to get your message out there, and to talk to people, you're going to lose. So money is extremely important. So I recommend to you, it goes back to the networking thing, but get to know people from across the country. And when you run for office, don't be afraid to ask for money. Over the last couple of years, I raised $300,000 for a presidential campaign. I've raised millions for Maverick Pac and other groups. When I've asked people for money, a lot of the time, people haven't given to politics, not because they're interested or because they don't care, because no one's asked them. So don't be afraid to ask people. Fundraising consultants will always give you lists of people who have donated before, and yes, it's great to go after them. But a lot of people just haven't been asked to give, so those are people you want to find. And a lot of people don't realize they are conservatives. So don't be afraid to talk to people that are Democrats or liberals. Like, they may just be a Republican who doesn't realize it yet. So don't be afraid to talk to everyone. The other important thing I tell people is to run your campaign like it's a business. So when candidates come and talk to me, I want to know where the money is going. I want to know, do they have an overpriced consultant? Are they spending it all on worthless yard signs? Do they not know what they're doing? So you want to run it like a campaign. It's an investment. When you give someone money, whether it's $1 or $100,000, you want to make sure the investment is run the right way. Unfortunately, there are a lot of consultants out there who just want to make money off candidates. Those are not the right people you want to hire. You want to go to Leadership Institute, and you want to go to these other groups that will recommend great consultants to you. You don't want to find the one who's just trying to buy their house in Florida based on your ad buys. And also be very clear on what the donations get you. There's sort of this mindset in America that when someone gives you money that they then own you or that you have to do what they say, and that's not the case if you're a good candidate. So yes, someone giving you money may get them a minute or two to state their case, which is fine. But be very clear with your donors what they're getting. They're not buying your vote, they're not buying you. They're perhaps getting a minute or two of your time to talk to you, but they're not getting in return. So I think it's very important to state that. So we talked a little about where I came from and how I got to where I am. We talked a little about the three important things if you want to run for office. It's timing, it's messaging, and it's money. I want to make sure we save a few minutes before our VIP guest comes to join us, take a few questions from the audience or comments you guys have on being a young conservative and thinking about running for office. So who wants to kick it off? Yes, sir.
So give us the first step. Like, I want to run for city council. What do I got to do? What's like the first thing I should do as a candidate?
Sure. Well, so first of all, I think you want to understand exactly, if you're running in an open seat, if you're running against someone else, you want to get the most amount of information possible. So you want to look at, like, if it's a seat where someone else has ran, you want to look at the voting records the last couple of years, see who voted for them, see what kind of issues they have. The more information you have before you run is very important. You also want to make sure you find a good campaign lawyer, because there's plenty of campaigns that have got themselves in trouble for the wrong reason. So it's very important you set things up properly the right way and understand the rules. But I would say that's a great idea to always start local. Some people think they're going to start out and run for president. President Trump was unusual that he wasn't a career politician. He got there, but that's a very unusual path. Most people want to start small, and that's the right way to do it. But I think getting the most amount of information possible before you run is the right way to do. And then go volunteer for a city councilman who's a Republican now and say, hey, can I shout at you for a day? I want to run. You'd be surprised how many elected officials love to hear a young person coming up to them, especially if they're older, and saying, hey, I'm a young guy or girl. I want to run for office. Can I follow you around for a day and learn? So in my life, and I look back, I've learned the most from being around politicians. For a year, I was next to Rick Scott every single day across the state of Florida. And I learned more just from listening to him talk than I ever learned in 7 years at Georgetown, which is a great school. So don't be afraid to hang around politicians either. Next.
What's your criteria generally for a Maverick Pac?
Sure. So we're looking for candidates that are under the age of 40. We have a couple that are, in politics, under 40 is considered very, very young. Even under 50 is still on the young side. We try to look for young people. Again, we're not a policy PAC, so there's no litmus test. We just want to find people that are free market candidates that want to come to D.C. and want to make a difference. We also don't like career politicians. Almost all of our candidates did something else. They were in the military. They ran a business. They started a business. We're not a big fan of people that are just career politicians or staffers. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think it's important to go out there and learn other things from life. That's a great question. So we're kind of leaning, we don't currently, we're starting to maybe lean towards that. That's one of the great things I mentioned, Elise Stefanik. So her PAC, EPAC, is now going to help female candidates in primaries. And she kind of came to that conclusion. She ran the NRCC's recruitment effort last year. The NRCC stays out of primaries for a lot of reasons. A lot of the great candidates can't get through primaries just because they don't have enough money, they're too young, they're a young female, whatever it is. So I think the future probably is playing in primaries, but it's sort of opening a Pandora's box there because, for example, when I worked for Rick Scott, we ran in the primary. This guy, Bill McCollum, had been in Florida politics forever. He was sort of the king. Everyone assumed he was going to run, and that Rick Scott was sort of this annoying rich guy. Rick Scott won, and kind of no one in Florida politics would have guessed that. So I think if you start picking, in primaries, you can be very good, but you can also be very bad if you pick a loser. By the way, this is Mark McKinnon, a very famous political consultant and now reporter, who asked that question. So make sure you guys introduce yourselves at the end, because this guy knows more about politics than just about anyone else. One of my quotes I didn't get to was talking about being on message, and I would always hear stories about President Bush's first gubernatorial campaign, and he was so on message about education. If you said to him, like, George, what time it is, he would start talking about how important it was to teach reading to kids. So when you run for office, whatever your message may be, just stay on it, and don't get dissuaded by the national news or any other interruptions that other campaigns throw at you. Yes, sir?
A place like, say, Broward County, where there's...
That's where I'm from, yeah. Lauderdale, yeah.
How do you advise not only just any young conservatives, but any candidates that's considering running because obviously I've helped out, helped out in campaigns, helped out during elections. But I'm interested in as far as what your take as to what would be the best approach.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be afraid just because a seat is historically Democratic. Like, don't be afraid. If you look at Will Hurd, no Republican should win that seat just based on the numbers alone. But Will's an unusual candidate. He runs a great race. He's a great congressman. So I wouldn't just say just because it's a plus T district doesn't mean you can't win. Just because it's a plus Republican district doesn't mean you're gonna win either. So I think just going out there and thinking about running for office, there are parts of Broward County, especially out west, that are more Republican. Parkland, some of those areas. We have Chip LaMarca, who was a great county commissioner in Broward, who's now in the state house. So there are some good Republicans in Broward. Georgia Mew, the former U.S. Senator from Florida, is from Broward. So there is kind of a long history of great Republicans in Broward. Definitely outnumbered by the teachers' unions and everything else. But I would say don't be afraid to get started. Don't let the thought that, yes, your area may be more Democratic than Republican. I've also found that a lot of Democrats are just Republicans who haven't discovered they're Republicans yet. And I talk to a lot of my younger employees. I'm like, okay, why are you a liberal? And they kind of recite some things. I start going through the kind of the Republican mantra, and they're like, oh, actually, a lot of that sounds pretty good. But I think people are so indoctrinated now, the Republican Party is evil. When we actually talk about some of the issues we stand for, many people actually agree with them. So a lot of Democrats are just Republicans that haven't been converted yet. So don't be afraid to get out there. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Lifestyle's better down south anyway.
Lesser taxes. Yeah. Yeah.
So I've worked on a few campaigns, a United States Marine, and I've just been debating on whether I want to run for political office for a few years, and like now I know that I want to do it. I was living in a brand new state that I just moved to a few months ago. How do I get my name out there? How do people know me? What should I run for? And how do I make a name for myself? Because I have no limit. Like if I get like a city council job that might do state rep, or I have no limit. Like I was governor or senator. If that opportunity would ever like come about one day, and I would love to do that. Just wondering where or how I should go about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for your service. It's great to see veterans out there. And this party needs more veterans running on both sides of the aisle. You're seeing a lot more veterans running for office. I think it's great for this country. So thank you for your service. And thinking about serving again. So my advice to you would be, get involved with your county party. Find a Republican elected official who's, in your area and talk to them. Ward Baker is actually speaking, I think, in a room over in a little bit. He just ran the successful U.S. Senate campaign in Tennessee. He actually ran Governor Scott's first campaign, but he knows Tennessee politics backwards and forwards. His name is Ward Baker. Big guy, big bald guy. You'll probably see him out in the hallway. But he's a very good tactician. He knows Tennessee politics very well. But I think, as I said, most elected officials, most donors, most party officials love to talk to young people who are interested in politics. So go talk to them, go pick their brain. They may just have a regular job for you, maybe you work a year or two, and that allows you to kind of figure out, where you want to run. But I would say never be afraid to ask people to have a meeting or grab a cup of coffee. I think most people out there love to see younger people want to get involved in politics. I think most older people in the Republican Party worry that when their generation dies off, that we're not going to exist because they read all these stories. They think the Republican Party is just the party of old white rich men. Yeah.
That's exactly what I know is going to happen.
Yeah.
Nobody my age steps up. It's people my age usually like socialists, liberals that just basically suck up to every minority and illegal there is. That's just.
But your body is the narrative. That's the current narrative.
Yeah.
But it's
Right.
not a true story.
Right. So I think if you walk the last hour or so, Kenny from Maverick Pac and I walked around this conference and talked to people, and that's not the impression you get when you walk around CPAC. This is an amazingly diverse crowd. There's some great people here from all walks of life that are all united by being conservatives. But again, if you only read some of the national media, yes, you buy into that narrative. I don't think that's actually the case. I think there are a lot of great young people out there that want to be Republicans. Maybe no one's reached out to them before. So I think I always tell people, like, give our generation a chance. I'm 34, so I feel relatively young, but not as young as you. But I think that the future of the Republican Party is very strong, and I think that, yes, of course, we have a lot of great older leaders in our party, but we have a lot of great younger ones too, and I'm pretty excited about the future of our party. But I'm happy to exchange info with you too. I'll connect you with some friends in Tennessee as well, but we need more veterans in the process for sure. Yeah. Hillary, you got a question for us?
So when you're coming from a couple different organizations like Maverick Pac or the Young Republican National Federation, a lot of us are kind of members of everything. How do we get connected? How do we get organizations that are on the same side that may be competing for membership? How do we work together to make sure that we get young people elected to office and that we're really just on the same team?
Yeah, so I think your question actually reminds me a bit what the gentleman from Broward County was asking about. So Hillary was the vice chair of the San Francisco Republican Party. Now, most people here would be surprised to know there even is a Republican Party in San Francisco, or that it's fairly active. Okay, well, But I think it speaks to, just because you live in a city where things are extremely liberal doesn't mean you shouldn't be involved in politics. I know you did a lot of great things in San Francisco, and now you're here on the East Coast, but I just think it's important to get out there and network. I mean, you and I met, you moved to D.C., we had mutual friends, we started talking, you got involved in Maverick Pac. I think that's what speaks of what's great about the Republican movement is there's so many great different organizations out there doing different but great things, so we're all about partnering up with them. I know you're on the board of the Young Republican National Federation, which does incredible work recruiting candidates, and Maverick Pac, with our background in helping fundraise, we want to work with you guys. We want to work with the Leadership Institute, which is sponsoring this panel, which helps identify and recruit great people. So we're kind of all working towards the same goal. I think it's important that we all kind of view each other as teammates, especially on the Democratic side. Everyone loves to bicker and fight each other. It's like we need to be united so that we can defeat the Democrats. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, best governor in the country, though. So yeah.
So, went to the first meeting about Mass for Trump, right? The first rally of 2020.
Yeah.
And one of the speakers said, you know what? You know how many politicians run? They don't need their Democrats to just get the seats because no one's running against them.
Right.
The strategy is every seat, fight.
Yeah.
Fight for it, fight for it, fight for it. You know what? If they have to spend their money against us, they're not giving that up to the National Party, which is going against, Trump in 2020.
Right.
I encourage everybody to do it now.
Yeah, it's interesting. Both Massachusetts and Maryland, which are two historically very liberal states, have two of the most popular governors in the country. No one thought Governor Hogan in Maryland would ever win. He managed to run. He ran a great campaign, and he won. He's been a very successful governor. So again, just because you're in a traditionally Democratic area doesn't mean that your message and you being a strong candidate, can't put you over the edge. If you had told me that the two most popular Republican governors in the country would be Massachusetts and Maryland, I would say a couple years ago I would have been very surprised. So you just never know. Yes, sir.
Do you have a boilerplate budget type thing? So when a person who's deciding to run and they're trying to work out their budget, do you have any boilerplate template of 30% goes to mail, 30% goes? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, so there's some good ones online, and I can definitely share one with you. I think things are just moving so much more on the online presence, especially if you're running as a younger candidate. The days of yard signs. You've talked to any consultant in the world, they'd say like yard signs are your worst investment, where you can spend a couple $100 online and have amazing return. So I would say just spending as little money as possible on sort of the on stuff that you don't need. These days you don't really need an office. You can work out of a car, you can work out of any place with a laptop, work out of a coffee store, not a Starbucks, but a different coffee store. But it's like don't waste your money on overhead that you don't need. But I think it's hard to say exactly what percentage. When you get higher up the food chain in political races, there's so much goes to TV. It's crazy that as our generation watches TV less and less, but still hundreds of millions of dollars will be spent on the 2020 campaign on both sides on TV advertising. So I think TV is still the king of what that's where most consultants make their fortunes. But I think in our lifetime we'll see that money will go much more into digital ad buys. So I would say put as much money into digital as you can. But it differs on what race you want to run for. Kenny, you got a question there?
I actually do. It's brewing.
Yeah.
But I'll go ahead. It's a little premature, but I'll go ahead. How much has social media kind of offset the need to raise money in campaigns?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, that's something Democrats do very well is to raise small amounts of money online. If you look at what Vote Blue and what some of the organizations have done, it's very incredible. Now, the Republican Party is trying to catch up. We're starting our own version of that Garrett Lansing has started. So I think we'll catch up to them. The Republican Party has always been known with the direct mail. Our people out there, love direct mail. But the era of direct mail is sort of dying off. So I think social media is wildly important. If you look at what Bernie raised millions in his first day, what Kamala Harris and others can raise. Yeah, AOC, of course. I try to avoid mentioning your name as much as possible, but yes, yeah. But yes, I think social media shows that you can catch on. So I remember I met with Dan Crenshaw as an example in Texas. My best man at my wedding served with him in the SEAL, so he introduced us and we met. He had almost no budget. He kind of just had a plan of running. So he ran with very little money, but he had such an amazing story. Here's this guy who was a Navy SEAL who was injured, had such an amazing story that basically overpowered others in his primary. They had much more money and much more establishment backing. So I will always say money is very important, but if your message is that powerful, if it's that strong, then I think you can overcome it. And social media is a huge part of that. Because all it takes is one thing to be shared. When President Trump tweets about a candidate, it can take a candidate from obscurity to getting millions of dollars and lots of clicks. So I think social media is wildly important.
So should a young person that doesn't have a lot of money, should they focus a lot of their energy and attention on social media? Or should they, is it a combination of that and then networking with the right people to kind of get a donor base?
Yeah, so I think a little bit of both. So I'm a fan of kind of the old school way of talking to people in public. It's great to meet lots of great people online, but I think you have to match that with also networking in person. You also realize that depending on where you run, your electorate might be a wide majority of older folks. The average voter tends to be older. They're retired. They have more time in their hands. They care more. Young people don't vote as much. So if you only focus on social media, you might be missing the 40 and up, 50 and up demographic that's not as active on social media, or perhaps has never even heard of whatever the cool new social media app of the week is. So I think it's important you got to do a little bit of both. Of course. Yes, sir.
Can I sit down with an hour with you and meet you?
Sure, let's do it. Over a cocktail? Yeah. All right, let's do it. Yeah. We got a couple more minutes before our VIP guest gets here, so I know there's a couple other great questions out there. Otherwise, I'll have to start pointing at random people at once if you guys don't jump in there. Yes, sir.
When you're starting to think about running, how do you find the issues that you want to help people out with?
Yeah. So I think it goes to whatever area you want to run in. There's very unique issues. So example, I mentioned, I work for Francis Rooney, who represents Naples, Florida, and the environment's a huge issue there. One, like most people that retire to Florida, they're retiring because they want to fish, they want to hunt, they want to look at the water every day, they want to go boating, whatever it is. So all the issues about drilling in the Everglades, for example, like many parts of the country, Republicans are all about drill, drill, drill. But if you live on a beach that you retired to after working 30 years in the Northeast and you move to Florida, you don't want them drilling in your backyard. So it's interesting. A Republican might say, how can a Republican be against drilling? But if your area is, if you live on a beach, if you live in the Everglades, you don't want drilling in your backyard. So I think it's important. That's why I think all politics is local. You always follow the National Party playbook. It may not make sense for your distinct area. So wherever it is you live, whatever area you want to run in, I would understand what issues are important to them, whether it's tourism, whether it's trade, whether it's the economy, social issues, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, you're elected to represent the interests of those people. You may have very strong beliefs in something, one way or the other. But even if you win, there's probably 40%, 45%, maybe 49.8% of the people that believe the opposite of you. So you want to make sure you reach across the aisle and at least talk to them, understand where they come from. Maybe you're not going to change your mind. Hopefully you don't. You don't change. No flip-floppers allowed here. But it's important to understand what the other side wants, because if you don't reach across the aisle, you're probably never going to be successful in politics. You have to understand the other side. Yes, sir.
In some of the deep blue areas, could there ever potentially be a situation where you would recommend that somebody not work with the local Republican Party, like say if it seems extremely dysfunctional?
Well, my 2 cents would be to say join that party, become chairman of it, and help fix the problem. So I think yes, there's some areas where the Republican Party is very strong. There are other areas where it isn't. But I think it's always important to work within the party structure. It's sort of, I know some people like to say, well, I'm an independent, but I lean Republican. But I think it's important to stay Republican. My advice would be to help repair that. Reach out to the state party and say, how can I help my area party, get stronger? And again, not to go back to Broward County, but that's where I'm from. It's an extremely liberal area, but it's one of the best run county parties in the state of Florida. Even though there's parts of Florida that are, 100% Republican in the Panhandle, the local party may not be as well run. Just because you're in a liberal area in a deep blue state doesn't mean you can't have a great party structure.
I wasn't suggesting working
Yeah.
outside the Republican
Yeah.
Party in terms of running as an independent.
Right.
But like, for instance, the gentleman from Boston, when he just moved to Tennessee,
Yeah.
he was wanting to know, well, what are the local
Yeah.
what are the local issues out there. You recommended that he depend on
Sure.
the local Republican Party, as a way to help him understand what Tennessee.
Right. So you're saying, so what if the local party chair isn't receptive? So I would reach out to someone else who's successful in the area, and whether maybe it's someone who's a donor, a former candidate. So I would find someone within the structure in that area who can help kind of be a resource for you. You're right. It may not always be the county party chair, but someone who has some experience in the area. Because my view in life, even outside of politics, is you always want to learn from those who have done before, those who have failed before. You can learn a lot from failed campaigns. I always recommend talking to candidates that lose, because they'll give you the honest story of hopefully why they lost if they look inward. But I agree. There's more than just the county party should be able to help you. Yes, sir.
Do you think running as a young person in office is the best way to show young people to come out to run, or do you think there's a better way?
That's a great question. So I think one of the things I've always been worried about sometimes is sort of that staffer to Politico route. It's like you see people that work for a congressman or work for a governor for 5 years, and they turn around and decide to run for office. And I kind of question, yes, they may know the issues well, they may know the people well, but they really have a lot of outside life experience. So I always like to personally see candidates who have done other things, whether it's serving in the military, starting a business, Peace Corps, Teach for America, something else to give kind of other experiences. So not to say there aren't great people that run, 24, 25, just run for office and just get it, but I like to see people that kind of do other things in life. So, yeah.
So can you talk about managing expectations running for office for the first time? Coming from San Francisco, obviously it's very different than someone running in Texas.
Sure.
But about not letting young people who are deciding to get involved, getting discouraged because it may not go their way the first time around.
Right. So one of my mottos in life is under promise, over deliver. And so I was an advanced guy early in my career. I worked in the Bush administration. So advanced people are anywhere the president or vice president goes, there's always advanced people that go ahead to set things up. And they always teach you, it's like you always promise less people. So if more show, you look great. And if the same amount show, it looks fine. But you never want to over promise and under deliver. So I would always say, like, don't get discouraged if things don't go great at first. But I would think, a lot of great campaigns don't win the first time around. My friend Will Hurd, we talked about, he lost his first campaign, bounced back, came back, ran again, and won. So I think you can't let a loss or some small things discourage you. It's not easy to run for office. It's not easy to run for office if you're 60 years old. It's especially not easy to run for office if you're younger. It's harder if you're a female. It's harder if you're a minority. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. The best things in life can sometimes be harder to achieve.
Do you think female candidates have a harder time raising money than male candidates?
I think they do. I don't think it's necessarily fair that they do, but I think a lot of studies show that sometimes women are afraid to ask for money, or they're afraid of seeing that if they're aggressive or brusque. Sometimes it's easier for guys to go panhandle. Those of you that haven't raised money before, it's not particularly easy to raise money, regardless of age or gender. You have to go to someone's office and say, hey, give me $1,000, give me $100,000, give me $100. It's not an easy thing to do. Most people are like, why should I give to you? What if you lose? What am I getting in return? So fundraising can be very difficult. I think it's definitely harder if you're a female. That's one of the things Maverick Pac tries to do, is sort of help you with that network. So if you're someone who wants to run for Congress and you come to our annual conference this summer in New York, you'll meet, first of all, other people across the country who are running for office, who can give you what works for them, what hasn't worked for them. But you also meet young business people who will say, oh, that guy is great. Like, I keep talking about Will Hurd, but the first time he spoke at a Maverick Pac conference, people were lining up saying, hey, how do I contribute to you? Where do I give to online? So I think it kind of comes back to just keep working hard and keep talking to people, and don't be afraid of people tell you no. They may come back around, especially in a primary situation. If someone tells you no, their candidate may drop out, they may lose, and they may come back to you in a few months and want to support you. So I always try to end things politely as well. If someone tells you no, doesn't mean you say, like, F you, move on to the next person. You want to end it politely so they come back to you and hopefully support you in the future. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Gladys, and I'm from Toronto, Canada. I ran last year for City Council and lost. But I wanted to know if your organization offers training for, international right-wing supporters.
Yeah, so we haven't done much international. There are some great organizations. I believe LI, which is sponsoring this, Leader Institute does that. I know some other groups that are here at CPAC do that. We pretty much focus on U.S. federal elections, but we always like to welcome our cousins from the north here. So, was it a close race or?
No, it was very heavily left-wing area, and the lady that won, she ran like twice before, and she keeps winning, and no one likes her.
So to some of the people in this room who may be a first-time candidate, what advice would you give a first-time candidate?
Just keep at it, and take every loss as a lesson learned, and good on you.
So I think we have time for one or two more questions before our special guest pops in. Yes, sir.
With candidates or with politicians in office for so long, and there being a need to go to the existing party or existing candidates to get mentored and fit in, do you think maybe term limits or maybe shorter terms or maybe an incentive for politicians to not stay in office for 30 years and try to bring more people in than
Yeah, I'm all for term limits. I talked a little bit about Mike Gallagher, who's one of our Maverick candidates from Wisconsin, has introduced a bill along with Senator Cruz and others to start term limits in Congress. There's another bill that Congressman Rooney introduced to, after 3 terms, your pay would drop to $1, which is sort of a de facto way around a constitutional term limit method. But I agree 100%. We want to bring fresh blood in. We want to bring a new set of eyes. Yes, I think in certain circumstances that having some of the more arcane parts of Congress, like yes, maybe it does help to have someone who's been around a while. But I think I think the bad outweighs the good there, and I think bringing in people with fresh ideas and fresh viewpoints are important. So I think if you're in a situation where you want to run for office and you think someone may be in that seat forever, like perhaps you want to look at a primary challenge if that person's not getting the job done.
Based on term limits in general, when I hear the advice, the thoughts is you don't want to remove the old guard really, because they're kind of the firewall. You can kind of see what's happening right now with Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
New guard's coming in, the old guard's kind of the firewall between going purely left, right?
Yeah, some of that. Yeah, I think some just is how the Democrats view their people in Congress. I mean, Pelosi's been clashing nonstop with AOC, with all these other young members of Congress. Speaker Ryan welcomed young members of Congress, and for all the things he did wrong and right, one of the things he did really well was he reached out to all these young members, people like Elise and people like Mike Gallagher. He got them committee assignments. He listened to them. He went to their districts to help them. I think, ironically, the Republican Party embraces a lot of these young leaders, where I think Pelosi looks out and is terrified of some of these young people moving up the ranks. I don't know if anyone saw that video of Dianne Feinstein being like, criticizing a bunch of little kids. It's like, I feel like if I ever really felt somewhat sympathetic for Dianne Feinstein, if now she's the moderate, it's like, God help anyone left in the state of California. So, yeah. I think we have time for one more before our special guest gets here.
Who are you excited about for next cycle?
Next cycle being in 2020? That's a good question. So I think, I guess to start off with, I think we had a lot of great people be elected this cycle. So in Florida, Ron DeSantis is doing an incredible job. And I think if you look at that race, it's interesting because it was a very close race. It was a race where the president was very helpful. And I think he's kind of reached across the aisle and has done an incredible job, especially on environmental stuff. And we talked a little bit about Republicans. You don't normally think of environmental stuff, but I was reading an article yesterday in the Florida paper talking about all these, typically Democratic environmental groups were saying what a great job he's been doing. So I think he's one case that's exciting. I think we have a lot of great people running for Congress. We have a few MAPAC members that will be announcing in the next few months. I met with one of our members the other day who's thinking about running in Virginia, who will be a really dynamic candidate. But I think the future of the party is very bright and very strong. So I started off asking who in this room is thinking about running for office. So we hopefully pick up any folks here today that might be more interested in running. Handful, yeah. Are most of you guys in red states, or are there other people here that are part of the blue states as well? Ah. Yeah.
How do you feel about those states in the middle, the ones that are teetering left to right?
Yeah.
How do you fight that?
Well, I think one of the things that President Trump has shown is that some of these blue states are actually can still be won. So I think you really can't write off any district, any state, any area as being Republican or Democratic. I think politics is very volatile right now. But I think the Midwest has always been kind of the heart of the Republican Party. So I think we seem to want to go anywhere. So no further ado, the other tallest person in the Republican Party has now walked in the room. So the campaign manager for President Trump's 2020 campaign, Maverick Pac. Yeah. So we're just talking about right now how we can win in blue states. We have some people here from Mass and Maryland and some other areas. We've been talking about how important what we can do in blue states. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. Obviously, the president won a lot of blue states, which they called the blue wall, which we crushed. However, first of all, thanks for everybody for coming out here and everything you guys do. I don't know exactly who everybody in here is, but I see a lot of MAGA hats, which makes me happy.
Yeah, if you want to come up here, we got a mic. Yeah.
So you were discussing blue states and.
A little bit. So I'm the chairman of Maverick Pac, which helps young candidates run for office, and you've spoken to some of our events. We have a lot of people here who want to run one day, so we've kind of been talking through the process a little bit.
Wow. Okay. So after doing this for 4 years, I do not want to run, but however, I do run probably one of the more difficult presidential campaigns I think in history. So as you know, a lot of the media does not like us very much, as I call them, the mainstream establishment fake news media. Do not like to give us any kind of fair stuff. So, however, look, I think we're building an operation that if you're deciding to run for 2020, there's going to be a lot of benefits. There's a lot of big things coming, I think, right now. We've building an organization to help small dollar fundraising go down ticket more, because as we know on the other side, they've been very successful with Act Blue. We have we've announced lately a kind of our own system for that, which I think on day one is going to be bigger and better because of its relationship with data trust, relationship with the party. That's going to give a huge opportunity. The other thing is just the clear numbers we're building. In 2016, we had about 765,000 volunteers. In 2020, we'll have 1.7 million. That's one volunteer for every 13 people I need to touch to win the presidency. We had 3,000 team leaders on the ground across the country. This time we'll have 90,000 team leaders across the country. Last time we had 5,000 trained, like super volunteers. In 2020, we're looking at 30,000 trained volunteers. That puts us in many new states and new areas that we haven't before. So new states we could flip, maybe like New Mexico, Minnesota, and other places where we can be fighting. And I think as the left continues to show this incredibly progressive agenda that is going to devastate our jobs and economy, I think we'll see new states come online as people see that this is not the agenda, not the kind of country they want to live in. just overall, even, and one last number, in 2016, we had 1,000 trained staffers, paid staffers on the ground. This time we're looking at 1,500. So almost at every metric, we are multiplied, 2, 3, 4, or 5 times what we're gonna be. Well, remember, when we start building that kind of operation, when we're knocking on millions of doors, when we're making millions of text messages, calls, and to vote for the ticket, and to vote for the party, and vote for this president, it's gonna lead a lot of opportunities to flip a lot of seats that have possibly been blue before, whether that's a state, whether that's national, whether that's Congress, whatever you wanna run for, that's a huge opportunity. So I'm getting the I gotta go. But this operation will be one of the largest presidential campaigns ever run, and I think the president that is going to have a big push down ticket. Hopefully we win back the House.
And you're going after the youth vote as well. I know you guys
We're going after the youth vote. We're building the biggest coalition program ever also. Youth vote, with what Charlie Kirk has done and other people have done to help the youth vote. I think what you have seen, what we're going to do with African American coalitions, Latino coalitions. I mean, look what happened lastly in the El Paso rally. 70% of the people who came to the rally were Hispanic. 50% were Democrat. 50% of the 70% were Latino women. 34% were from New Mexico. Those numbers show that Latinos are supporting this president and the policies he's done and the changes he's made to protect this country, to build jobs, and to do everything they need to do to make this country great again. So thank you for everybody, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for stopping by. Yeah. All right, thanks, guys. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of the conference.